Welcome back to The Right Angle, and today I'm going to be going over one of the three fundamental structures of woodworking, the panel. Now the other two are the frame and the box, which I'm going to separate into two other videos for a total of 3 different videos going over each of the structures. Hopefully this will give you a good understanding or a good start to understanding how to make any type of cabinetry and furniture. Alright, so what is a panel? Well, a panel is generally 2 or more pieces of hardwood like this glued together to make a wider surface or a wider board depending on your project needs. Now you can join these boards using different types of joinery like biscuits, splines, or dowels, but for today's sake I want to join these 2 edge grain faces using a butt joint and some glue. And what I did also to help speed this process along is I already completed the 8 steps of squaring. Now if you don't know what the 8 steps are, or you need a refresher, make sure you check out this video below, or check the video in the description below. Hopefully that'll give you guys a good idea of what you need to do prior to the glue up. With that in mind, now I want to show you guys how we make sure that the joint that we're about to combine together looks seamless. Now that these boards have gone through the milling process and they're square and flat, we're ready to glue this up with Tip-On. Now before we do this, I want to check the seam here and make sure that we have a perfect seam. Now I've already done the trick that I'm going to show you here in a few seconds, which is in and out. Here we're going to put the letters I and O on the opposing sides of the seam so that we know which way to orient the boards on the joiner fence. Now the reason we do this is because sometimes the way the joiner is set up, even though I'm checking using a nice right angle, there's sometimes discrepancies in the fence itself which lead to causing the joint to be not perfect. So the best way to help eliminate those discrepancies is by using this little trick called in and out, where we're going to label the letters I and O so we know which way to orient these boards on the jointer. To help demonstrate that trick that I was talking about over by the table saw, we've labeled the boards with the letter O and I. O being outside and I being inside. So when I come up to the joiner, I know which way to orient the boards. O being outside, facing away from the fence, and I facing inside towards the fence. Now we'll be able to joint both of those edges on the joiner to create a perfect joint. So now that we finished up with the joiner and we used that little trick of in and out, now we have a perfect seam, or a relatively close to perfect seam. So what I want to do is now get my station prepped for the glue up. Now anytime I'm doing the glue up, I love to stick with these Bessie parallel clamps. Now this one is a monster, but it's the only parallel clamp that I own, so I'm going to stick with that just because I prefer using this when doing a panel glue up. You can also use clamps like the old handy dandy pipe clamp, some F-style clamps like these, or even some quick grip clamps like these. Really useful. I love these ones just because they're so quick and easy to maneuver. And then we're also going to have to make sure that we've got our Tip-On glue, our glue brush, little paper towel to keep things clean, and then just for some emergencies, I always like to have some call blocks sitting around. That way, depending on if it's a larger board, sometimes you have issues where you pinch and it wants to tend to bow the piece. Usually that just means you have too much pressure, but in some cases, having these to help pinch the ends of the board or the center of the board to help keep it flat during the gluing process is a great thing to have sitting at your station. Now that I got all the pieces that I need for the glue up, I'm going to do a dry run. Now what this is going to do is allow me to get the clamps that I want up on the table. We've cleared the table. I've set the width of the clamps to the width of the board, plus a little bit. That way I have enough room to wiggle it in there, especially when working with the glue. We've got our glue brush, paper towel, cawls, and even some F-clamps over here in case of emergencies. This way we can just get good at processing or going through the process of the glue up prior to gluing. Now as soon as we open that glue and it touches the wood, we've got an open time. So we want to make sure that we're being efficient and providing good solid pressure, not warping the board, and getting you a nice flat wide panel. Okay, now that we went through our dry run, we've got everything in place. We're ready for glue up. I always like to start with one nice little bead down the center on both edge faces. Do a quick little slide of them together, pull them apart. This way we can see if there's any additional glue that we need to add. Now, I'm always used to just using my finger to help push along the glue, but in this case you can also use what I brought over, which is the brush. So, other option. But I usually prefer just to use the finger. I feel like it distributes it just a little bit better, and I don't mind it. And then we're ready to clamp them together. And if we did everything right, you should have a little bit of squeeze out, which we do. I'm not looking for too much, but just enough to know that the seam is completely covered and strong. I'm also going to make sure to look underneath each edge to make sure that the board is staying flat. If not, that's when we might pull in the cauls into account and pull out the F-clamps. But from what I can see, we are flat on both sides and good to go. And there you have it. That's one fundamental structure of woodworking, the panel. Now the next videos that are going to be coming up are the frame and the box, so I hope you stay tuned for that. Otherwise, if you like content like this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button as well as that notification bell so you can get similar content like this coming your way. Other than that, I hope you guys had a good time and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.